Martin Bell, welcome to the podcast with myself, Paul Houghton. So to people that don't know, Martin Bell was a professional skier, an Olympian for Great Britain, famous over in the UK. No doubt in the skiing world, of course, everybody knows you, but to the wider audience. We start off just sort of lightly though, Martin, in terms of where you're from and just, what sort of growing up was like before we sort of venture into the sort of the transition into sort of the profession of skiing.
Well, growing up for me and my brother Graham, obviously, was in the military world because our father was in the Royal Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So we were born on the base in Akrotiri in Cyprus.
Wow.
We moved back from Cyprus when we were just toddlers. And then we lived on various bases, Watton and Cranwell. And we really, at that stage, before we were skiers, we were hill walkers and hikers because that's what our parents and indeed our grandparents liked to do.
Okay.
Both my parents' families were from the Wirral, from the Merseyside area, and they always used to go on holidays to North Wales, Snowdonia, or to the Lake District, or occasionally up to Scotland and go hill walking. So, one year we went up to Scotland in the summer hill walking, and our mum happened to see that there were ski lifts there, and she said, "Oh, why don't we come back next winter and try some skiing?" And we did. I was 6, my brother was 5. We learned to ski at the Austrian ski school based in Carbridge near Aviemore.
Mm-hmm.
And we really enjoyed it. We started skiing at our local plastic ski slope, which was actually in Nottingham. It doesn't exist anymore now. Carlton Forum, it was called. And it so happened that there was a race on at the plastic ski slope. Very short race, maybe 6 gates long. And I entered it and I won it. And so the first race I ever won was in Nottingham. And the first prize was a scholarship on a training camp with a club called the Whitehair Ski Club. That doesn't exist anymore either.
Nor does my hair, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Time marches on, but this was around 1974, and I had a training camp in Switzerland in Andermatt, and I actually rode the lift with Bernhard Russi, who lived there. The famous Olympic champion from Switzerland. And soon after that, we moved up to Edinburgh. My father had a job posting up there, or he chose Edinburgh for his job posting so that we could ski more as a family up in Scotland. And we skied every weekend, mainly at Cairngorm, also racing at Glencoe and Glenshee, and skiing twice a week at least at the Hill End Plastic Ski Slope, which is still the longest plastic ski slope in the UK. A great resource still for skiers today. And that was really our life until I turned 14 and I was recommended to try out for a ski academy in Austria. I'd actually been learning German for a couple of years in Edinburgh, so I spoke a bit of German, and I made it through the entrance exam and then spent 4 years in Austria. And around that time was when I also got onto the British ski team and started doing World Cups. And then, I was to race World Cups really from 1981 through till 1995. So that was a great time in my life. And, being on Ski Sunday and like you say, the pressures and all that stuff. But it was a different time as well.
Do you class yourself as a natural? Do you class yourself and Graham is basically just natural, because you started at such a young age?
Well, I've always tried to think about this, and it's a difficult one to really put your finger on.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had the natural athletic ability,
Mm-hmm.
and my brother does as well. Maybe my brother is not quite as fast and explosive as I am, which is why he never really tried his hand at slalom at all. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
although I'm better known for my downhilling, I was actually British slalom champion several times in the 1980s. And, I was a decent slalom skier. So I think I had that power and quickness. And then we got a reasonable amount of time on snow. I think compared to the kids in the Alps, we did not get as much time on snow as they get.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
that's crucial, particularly between the ages of kind of 9 and 13 years old.
Hmm.
You know, the kids in the villages in the Alps, they're up there almost every afternoon. I think that's crucial. I really think, you know, time on snow is almost the toughest thing to overcome, but it can be overcome.
Mm.
You know, we were late developers somewhat. Dave Riding, our current star, was far more of a late developer, you know, a huge late developer.
Mm.
Even at the age of 21, 22, no one could have ever predicted that he would be on a World Cup podium. Whereas actually at the age of 21, 22, I was already getting my best results. So yeah, I think I had certain, you know, prerequisites in terms of athletic ability and power and strength, which certainly do help in ski racing. And then obviously, I suppose to become a downhiller, maybe you have to be slightly crazy.
Well, you said that, Martin. I thought I'm not going to say it. I'll have everybody coming after me on Twitter probably. In terms of skiing, I mean, what is the mentality? Because obviously you see the shots, you know, when you watch it on Ski Sun, you see the view deck going down, and it's like, whew, you know, it's daunting to somebody just watching the view going down, let alone, you know, what is it like coming out the gates and the speed is picking up? I mean, you can obviously feel that speed picking faster and faster as you're going down. How do you stay composed and focused? I know you've done it numerous times, so it's a bit like driving a car probably for you, but you know, those initial times when you're going on those sort of World Cup sort of races, and the course is incredibly fast, incredibly tough. What is it like, you know, adapting to that and, you know, almost becoming accustomed to that, or do you never become fully accustomed to it?
Yes, you definitely do become accustomed to it. But the fact is that when you're racing from December till March,
Mm-hmm.
and then you take some time off in the summer, you have to, as a downhiller, become reaccustomed to it every
Yeah.
autumn.
Yeah.
And that was part of our training in October, November. We'd get up on the glaciers
Mm-hmm.
in usually in Austria or Switzerland. Maybe have some short downhill courses. You couldn't have full length because the glacier ski areas are not that big, but
Mm-hmm.
try and get up to, you know, 70 miles an hour, 75, 80 miles an hour again, and get used to that speed all over again.
Mm.
And, you know, the first couple of races of the season, you know, today's downhillers say the same thing. It takes them a while to get back into, you know, the feeling at home at speed. And
Mm.
then by March, we'd be like, oh yeah, just, you know, flying down 80 miles an hour. It was just, you know, it was just another weekend at the office. So you definitely do get used to going that fast, you know, the
Mm.
wind in your ears and the ground shaking underneath you. And, you know, it really depends how smooth the surface is. Like 65 miles an hour on a rough surface can feel way faster than 90 miles an hour on a smooth surface.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot depends on the courses and how well they're prepared. And obviously nowadays they're much smoother than the rough stuff that we used to have to race on. Or this is what we tell the youngsters now, but it is pretty much true. You go back and look at those downhill videos from the 80s. So yeah, and in terms of the mindset, it's always a dichotomy between aggression and flow. And
Mm.
this, I think this holds true for the other disciplines as well, for slalom, giant slalom, super G. You know, you have to be racing aggressively. You have to be wanting to go fast. You have to be fired up. You know, some people in the start gate are really fired up. I
Yeah.
preferred to calm myself down in the start gate because I knew that I would get fired up anyway.
Yeah.
Because you also have to be able to flow. You know, if you're too aggressive, you dig your edges into the snow too hard, you end
Yeah.
up slowing yourself down. So it's got to be smooth and it's got to flow, but with the aggressive mindset of looking for speed.
The start is crucial, isn't it? It sets the tone for almost the entire. I mean, you see people pick it up halfway after a bit of a rocky start, but it's very hard. More often than not, you know, once the first sort of three gates, if it's gone wrong, they're sort of fighting the fight all the way sort of down to try and get back into that rhythm. And you know, even if you do come down safely, you've sort of lost the time up, you know, and the speed, at the sort of top end. And yet there's I'm trying to think of the skier. There's so many of them, but There's a really aggressive skier. I think it's from Austria. Who's incredibly aggressive, and he used to come out the gates and. You know, the first three, he literally was crazy a little bit to some extent. He was so aggressive. But when it went right, he basically was unstoppable, you know, when he would come down. And when it went wrong, he'd literally be flying out, you know, halfway side of the mountain sort of thing. You know, I think one Olympics, I can't remember his name eludes me, but I think it was one Olympics, he was favourite. And in almost like the third gate, he literally went sort of completely sideways. And
Hermann Maier.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yes.
he was amazing to watch, you know, because the aggression was just, it was almost like he was playing with the course like a toy, but which is scary in a lot of ways because it's just, I mean, how do you put it? Reckless when it comes off looks like genius, doesn't it? And when it doesn't come off looks like the other side, doesn't it? It's, you know, but he obviously had an amazing amount of success, but then obviously had the downside. I think it was at one Olympics where it didn't go. It went the other side, didn't it? Where he crashed out, and
he certainly did. And you know, it was possibly one of the most famous crashes in ski racing ever.
Yeah.
In the '98 Olympics in Nagano. And what happened that day was they had training runs on that course, so they knew what that first jump was like. But on race day, the weather changed and there was a slight tailwind. And so they came faster into the jump and it threw everyone off. And, you know, Hermann Maier was one of the early racers to go. And yeah, the most incredible thing about that crash was not just the crash itself, but that 2 or maybe 3 days later, he came back and won a gold medal in the Super G. And then he went on to win another gold medal in the giant slalom. Yeah. So, you know, to come back from that crash, that shows strength. I think any ski racer can crash. It happens to all of us. It's how you react to it that really distinguishes the great ones. But yeah, you always you want to be on the edge. You know, you need to be on the edge. Perhaps I wasn't on the edge as most. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't quite crazy enough. I tried to be crazy, or I think I was crazy, and I tried to be aggressive. Yeah. But you know, it also, it's one of these things that does change with age as well. So if you go to a Europa Cup, which is the next level down from World Cup, you have a lot of 17, 18, 19-year-olds from Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and they're all trying to get onto the World Cup team. Yeah. And just the first training run at a Europa Cup downhill, usually a third of the field will crash because they're just going crazy. They're putting their heads down. Then if you go to a World Cup, you don't see that many crashes because they have that much more experience. You know, the average downhillers are in their late 20s now. So they don't crash that often, but every now and then even they get it wrong. And then obviously when they do, it can be really nasty.
The fascinating thing about skiing is you never can tell. Depends, you know, the weather conditions have a major impact, don't they? I mean, the amount of times I've watched races, you could be coming in at 29 or 30 or wherever you're at, and you've seen literally the carnage. I don't mean everyone's like crashed nasty, but you know, there's so many people have just, you can see what's happened with the, you know, the results, and you probably hear it and everything else from the top. So that's a different type of mindset, isn't it? Because on one hand, you go, great, this is an opportunity where maybe my skills might, a certain way to ski on this day is going to suit me like hand in glove, if that makes sense. You know, a more subtle way of skiing, still fast, but a more precise, subtle way of skiing is really going to pay off on this course and these conditions. You know, when you go into certain courses, you favour certain skiers because of the style in which they ski and the conditions in which they ski best. And that's what I used to love about skiing, is that you sit there and go, wow, I wonder who this course today. And then you'd really be tuned into the weather conditions like no other event to really see it almost flip a course on its head to some extent, and the favourites, and you're like, wow, you know, and then suddenly you'd be sitting there, or either somebody posts a time really early, like in the first sort of 3 or 4, and then they hold on for the entire, you know, for the sort of favourites, as it were, and then it almost comes again. You end up with somebody at the back end also then come and do, you know, because they see it as a great opportunity to really get into points, and it's they're the fascinating ones for me, because the ones that are sort of normal, you tend to get either the favourites in where they need to be, but the really, really hard day, I'm not, you know, there's a lot of hard days, but the really, really hard days, you get so much going on in the event. You get the early starters trying to post one to hold on. You get the later starters seeing it as a great opportunity, and mixed in between that, you've got an incredibly difficult race going on. And I think that's where skiing, if I could bottle that up and pass it to somebody who's never watched it and say, watch this race on this day. This is skiing at its absolute best. You couldn't tell. It doesn't matter whether they're the favourite and leading the tour by 100 points or whatever it was. Today, that goes out the window. It's anyone's, sort of game today. And unlike almost any other sport, isn't it, really? I mean, almost, maybe you can maybe sort of say, sort of sailing to some extent because of the conditions of the sea, etc. But there isn't many sports that can really be turned on their head, are they, really, that much?
Yeah, for that reason, it's a sport that is never, ever boring.
Yeah.
Because every course is different. The snow conditions vary from 1 minute to the next. The weather can vary from 1 minute to the next. It is very unpredictable. My brother and I used to have a saying: the good ski racer expects only the unexpected, because you really don't know what's going to happen. And yes, particularly in the speed events, the downhill, where there are long straight sections, sometimes you get what's known as glazing of the track, where perhaps there's a little bit of new snow on the track if it has snowed recently, and then that snow gets packed down and it gets polished, and you can even sometimes see on the TV shots that the track is glinting in the sun. And that's when hang on, some guys are going to use this track and be very, very fast. So yeah, I mean, World Cup races have been won from start numbers in the 60s, actually in all 4 of the disciplines, I believe. I was there when an unknown guy from Liechtenstein won the World Cup downhill in Val Gardena from a start number in the 60s. Markus Foser, a good friend of mine. And yeah, he was just as surprised as everyone else. So yeah, ski racing, it is very unpredictable. What I tell my kids that I coach now is the clock doesn't care who you are. The clock doesn't know how much training you've done or how much money your parents spent on your skis or race suit. The clock doesn't care about any of that. The clock is very impartial that way. And that is one of the beauties of the sport, for sure. So yeah, and long may it continue to be as unpredictable.
And do you have favourite sort of ski resorts, favourite races that are really in your mind? If you sort of said, yeah, they're the ones I really either had your best results or just enjoyed skiing, the most.
Well, my best results were in Åre in Sweden, so it's always fun for me to watch that course when it comes around. And my first top 10 result was in Val Gardena. That's also a result where my teammate Konrad Bartelski had a fantastic result a couple of years before I got onto the tour. So that's always, I think, a favorite of the Brits, and it's just a beautiful place in the Dolomites. It's an amazing course with just huge amounts of airtime, and the famous camel jumps, where it's the only time where you actually try to take off and jump off the jump rather than try and absorb the jump. And then Wengen is a beautiful place. I never had much success there. Kitzbühel is obviously the mecca of ski racing. There's no getting away from that. I don't know. Have you ever been to Kitzbühel?
No. Nobody ever wants to see me ski. Sort of mine. I mean, I honestly, there's some people that just aren't born to ski, and that's me. So on that front, so I'm born to enjoy it. And the irony is, I absolutely love it. I was born into that era of they used to have sport on a Friday. I can't remember what it was called. BBC used to have a Friday sports program, and used to always have skiing on that Friday afternoon. It was almost a fixed position on that Friday, which was. And I was talking to someone recently about BBC Sport and coverage of sports and how things have changed. I think I was talking to Alan Lamb, the cricketer, and we're talking about cricket in terms of way back when he was playing, about the coverage.
Well, he's a keen skier. I met him in a ski resort once. He was on holiday. Yeah.
Well, I've got another one for you. I was talking to Rory Underwood, and obviously he's from the from the RAF. So I was just about to say, have you bumped into him on your travels within sort of the RAF?
I haven't skied with him, but I did bump into him and his brother at Superstars when I was doing Superstars back in 2003. Yeah, so
Small world.
good lads, and great players. The rest of the coverage was by the host broadcaster, the Austrians or Swiss or French or Italians or whatever. So yeah, that's really how ski racing became such a big part of British TV.
Yeah.
And I think fueled the boom in skiing and dry ski slopes. The number of dry ski slopes that were built in Britain in the 80s. I mean, some of them are now in disuse or have shut down. But it was a boom time for sure, and it was a great time to be around and be a skier. Now we've had Brexit, we've had COVID. The British ski industry will never quite be the same. There won't be the same numbers of kids going out to get jobs in ski resorts because of Brexit is going to make it much more difficult. There will be some, but not as many. So yeah, the media coverage was a wonderful time. I did a little bit of ski commentary myself after retiring from ski racing. And then, I happened to marry an American lady and I moved over here and I got more into the instruction coaching side of things.
You gave up on our weather, did you, Martin?
Well,
said enough's enough, but enough of you, enough of this weather now.
Yeah, the lack of snow part of it, the lack of snow. I mean, I did always want to live in the mountains.
Yeah.
And, I think if I hadn't ended up in Colorado, I would have ended up in Austria or Switzerland or somewhere like that, perhaps. But it's a wonderful thing to be in the mountains any time of year, really. But
absolutely. And you touched upon it earlier on that you've literally done it from sort of dot, where originating from just walking. So you're obviously someone that just takes to the scenery, that the whole the ambience of it from the minute one, isn't it? So whether you're skiing or whether you're just walking or whether you're just there. Where are we at going into the Winter Olympics, just from a skiing perspective and sort of your expectations? Or do we have ears going over for that, for the downhill, and both on the men and women's side? And what should we expect just in general? Is there favourites for those sort of events from your sort of expert mind?
Well, Britain has really achieved a lot of success in more in the freestyle side of skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah.
So, slope style, half pipe, big air, those types of events. We have, serious medal contenders in those events. It's a fact of life that a lot of these events you can train for without having mountains. You can practice your aerial maneuvers into water or into a foam pit, and then you really just have to take it to the snow and learn to land it on a pair of skis or on a snowboard. So, that Britain does have an advantage in those sports, and we have achieved a lot of success in those sports. And those are probably our best medal prospects. As a ski racer, I was an old ex-ski racer myself. I'll be pinning all my hopes on Dave Riding, of course. Dave has been a fantastic ambassador for ski racing for Britain. I'd like to say I have a small hand in his success. I ran a couple of camps at the plastic ski slope in Rossendale in Lancashire back in the early 2000s when Dave was 14, 15 years old, and he came to those camps, and I could tell even then that he was going to be a good slalom skier.
Yeah.
I had no idea he would be quite that good. And, he has been on the podium of a World Cup race 3 times in his career over the last 4 years. So, there is always, if you can be in the top 3 of a World Cup, you can be in the top 3 of an Olympics. And so there is a chance that he might equal the achievement by Alan Baxter of the bronze medal in 2002. But slalom, it's as you know from watching it, there's a lot can go wrong in slalom, right?
Yeah,
There's 60 gates, and every single one of those gates, something can go wrong. So,
absolutely.
my fingers will be crossed for Dave. On the women's side, we've got two very experienced racers, Alex Tilley, who has placed in the top 15 of a World Cup, and Charlie Guest, who last season placed in the top 20 of a World Cup. But, maybe a top 10 or a top 5 might be possible. I think a medal would be a bit of a stretch, but you never know. And they certainly have had fantastic careers, and they've kept the flag flying on the ladies' side. My own daughter is trying to qualify for the Olympics. She's only 20 years old, and I'm not sure if she'll make it this time, but hopefully she'll be at the Olympics in Milan Cortina in 4 years from now.
What was it like to come out of the competitive side into being an instructor? And do you ever have that sort of yearn to ever go back, or do you have to literally qualify to get even back into a chance to go? I mean, what is, if you ever said, oh, tomorrow I'd love to go back and have one more go at it, do you literally have to go through a whole heap of rounds and trials and everything else to even get a chance to go into a downhill?
Yeah, I mean, people have done that, it is not easy. Well, there are two very famous American racers that did it. Phil Mayer, who was a World Cup winner, he made a kind of comeback in his early 50s, and all he wanted to do was qualify to go to the US National Championships, and racing against 17-year-olds, and he managed it. There was another very sad case of Bill Johnson, the '84 Olympic champion, and he made a comeback in the year 2000 when he was already, he was over 40 at this stage, and he had a terrible crash, was in a coma for a couple of weeks, suffered irreversible brain damage. So it is a young man's game, I think, particularly on the speed events side. Like, I still actually, when I'm coaching the race kids that I coach now, I will have a run through a giant slalom course or a slalom course. I love it, but I'm probably not going to run a downhill again at 85 miles an hour. I think it's safe to say.
So when you need to put them in their place after they've been maybe ribbing you or picking on you for a session, you go, no, time for a race now, guys. And you just put down a time and just say, yep, just remember, I'm Martin Bell. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And I am coaching like 12 and 13-year-olds, so let's just say I can beat some of them.
and so what's life like for yourself after this? Do you get a chance to sort of just go skiing with Graham or anything like that? Just gym? Is it still part of like your everyday? I mean, obviously you do it as an instructor, but do you? Let's just say if you stop being a ski instructor, would you just still hit the slopes anyway, just for the love of it?
Of course I would, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely have a love for the sport, and I'm trying to communicate that to the kids that I coach. I mean, the time when I retired from ski racing, it was not easy. I had to kind of find my way, and I did a little bit of commentary. I did a little bit of writing. I actually wrote for a ski magazine for many years, and I think the last time that I did ski with my brother was when we were testing skis for that magazine. It was called the Daily Mail Ski Magazine, and then it got changed to the Daily Telegraph Ski Magazine. And unfortunately now it's shut down, because magazines are printed on paper and everything is on the internet now. Yeah. So I actually haven't skied with my brother for a couple of years. I would love to. But during the winter, I first got into instructing, and I was actually out of the racing scene for a while. And I got back into race coaching when my daughter started racing. And now I coach in Vale for the ski club here in Vale, which is actually a very big, successful club. Yeah. It's produced, quite a lot of the top American racers. And so there is a lot of talent here. And, I'm lucky to be coaching some very talented 12 and 13-year-olds. And they ski 5 days a week, so I'm pretty busy. And that's from early November until the beginning of May, You know, it's a long season. So I actually don't get a lot of time just to kind of, oh, I'd like to, you know, just go to Japan and do some powder skiing or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that easy for me to get away because I'm, you know, working hard with these young athletes here in Colorado. But, you know, we make a point, if it dumps a couple of feet of snow, we're not going to go and shovel that snow off a slalom course. We're going to go and ski the powder in the famous back bowls of Vale, you know, and that love for the sport, that's what these kids are going to have to keep them through many years after they've finished racing.
In terms of skiing in general, if you could classify your top 5 skiers, and there's no better person for me to ask on this because I'm not the expert. If you could classify your top 5 skiers of all time, who would they be?
Oh, that's put me on the spot there a little. I would have liked a little preparation for that, but
You can put your brother at number 1 if you want to keep the family ties.
Sorry, Graham, he's not going to make it. I mean, we're talking top 5 skiers in the world of all time. Oh, that is so tough. That is so tough. I mean,
if it makes you feel any better, just say I forced you into it and blame it on me. And you know they don't know me anyway. In fairness to them,
you know, I'm going to have to put Ingemar Stenmark at the top because he is just the king. He won the most races, and you know, right behind him, Lindsey Vonn. You know, Lindsey Vonn. She came really close to breaking his record. You know, if she hadn't had all the injuries that she had,
yeah, unbelievable,
amazing strength coming back from every time.
Yeah.
Then there's no doubt that she would have broken that record. You know, she is a larger than life character. There's no doubt about that. I mean, she's not everyone's cup of tea, but you know, and she's got the blonde, you know, the blonde personality and likes to be the big star. But underneath that, you know, you have to respect the sheer competitiveness of her willpower. You know,
and it'd be easy not to come back. It'd be easy,
to
you know,
come back
especially
from those injuries.
Yeah, especially when you've been successful. I mean, put it this way: if you've not been successful, and you have to make a comeback. You're making a comeback for a whole lot of reasons. You know, usually apart from just your love of it.
To get back to my top 5, you mentioned Zurbriggen. Actually, of my era, I'm not going to choose Piermin, although he was a great racer and a lovely guy. I'm going to choose Mark Girardelli.
Ah, yes.
He did it the hard way. He did it on his own. You know, he was an Austrian, part of the Austrian system, and his dad had a huge falling out with the Austrian ski team and said, "Okay, my son's going to race for Luxembourg." You know,
I never knew that.
I'm not sure if they'd ever even been to Luxembourg. Somehow they got him a Luxembourg passport, and it was just him and his dad and maybe a ski technician traveling around.
Wow.
You know, he didn't have a huge team backing him up, and he still won the overall World Cup 5 times. You know, a record which was only recently broken by Marcel Hirscher. So Mark Girardelli, for me, you know, the mental strength that it took just to kind of put up with sitting and having dinner with his dad every night through the winter, the hotel they stayed at. You know, he gets my vote. And then another one that I would like to highlight is Franz Klammer. I mean, Franz Klammer made the sport what it is today. But I think the thing that I admire the most about Franz Klammer, when he was interviewed after the race, whether he had won the race or come 45th, it didn't matter. He was exactly the same. He had a smile on his face. He had a word and a chat for everyone. And that is such a good example, I think.
Absolutely.
And that is why he is still so loved. And in fact, in Austria, they've just brought out a feature film about his life, you know.
Okay.
That's how well loved Franz Klammer still is.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. There are so many. There are so many. I mean, Marcel Hirscher, Alberto Tomba. You know, Tomba certainly had the sense of drama, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, the current star, Michaela Shiffrin on the women's side. You know, how far will she go? Will she will she be the one to break Stenmark's record where Lindsay just came up short? You know, that's going to be the big question coming into view over the next few seasons.